shotgun a beer next time we do an ad read.
All right, and officially starting. Welcome back, Tribe from the North, Brave and Bold, the official, unofficial podcast of your Idaho Vandals and the Vandals affiliate on the Big Sky Podcast Network. I'm your host, Brian, today joined by Marten, a.k.a. the Tromboner, according to Chris, now and forever, Heemstra. Marten, how's it going?
I'm doing good, Brian. How are you?
Every time I get to say tromboner, I'm doing well. Today is our official preview of Idaho's men's and women's basketball teams, where we're going to give you all the names, the important facets of each team, so you'll be ready for both Big Sky Conference basketball seasons, which happen to tip off this Thursday. But first, as always, ain't nothing like cracking a Montucky cold snack, an ultra-refreshing light beer born in majestic Big Sky country. The best part is, when you crack a snack, you're giving back. Montucky Cold Snacks donates 8% of all profits back to local causes, even right here in Idaho, supporting organizations like CW Hogs and Idaho Food Bank. Yeehaw! That's freaking awesome. Montucky Cold Snacks, the light American lager for pow pow rippers, gator wranglers, pony riders, and badass do-gooders. Visit MontuckyColdSnacks.com today to find out how to get ya ass some snacks. And Marten, it's been a while, but we're not talking about speculation today. We have games.
It's finally here. I am so excited for basketball, or just Idaho sports in general.
Yeah, and before we go in, first off, we're gonna lead with women's because our women's team is projected to do better. So that's where we're starting. But yeah, it's been 9-ish months. I mean, everyone knows how long this has been going on, but for us recording, seriously, we try our best to have concrete stuff we're talking about. It is 1,000 times easier to just say, this is who we're playing. And we finally get to do that. Which is to say we had way less prep this time, which is great news. Martin's going to take over the women's preview in 2 seconds, but before we get there, it's important for us to discuss the protocols for the men's and women's season because this season will be different than seasons past. And it's different in a few specific ways. Now, the first thing that is normal, and maybe the only thing that's normal, is we will continue to have a 20-game conference schedule. Typically, we have an 11-team conference. You play each team twice. That's 20 games. That's not how it's going to be this year. Usually we have travel partners, and we travel to Eastern Washington. The team we play on Thursday, Eastern Washington plays Saturday. Eastern Washington plays Saturday, and the team Eastern played Thursday. We play Saturday. We're not doing the trades like that anymore. Each team in the Big Sky is going to play 10 total Big Sky teams on back-to-back games, Thursday night, then Saturday morning or afternoon. So, for example, when we play Montana that week, we play Montana twice. We play Montana Thursday evening and then Saturday afternoon, then head back home. There are some non-conference games that have already been played. Our first conference games are this week, and after the couple conference games this week, this is, by the way, all these are the same for men's and women's. After a couple conference games this week, each team has a few non-conference games between now and the end of December, and December 31st and January 2nd is week 2 of our conference play. And in terms of people attending, though this answer is really school to school, state by state, a lot of schools are not allowing fans. Idaho is not allowing fans. Now, regardless whether the university wanted to or not, and Idaho's been kind of on the cutting edge of COVID stuff, the state of Idaho's in stage 2 recovery, meaning gatherings of over 10 people aren't allowed. So we're just happy that basketball's allowed, but for sure, fans are not going to be coming to Idaho games until the state exits stage 2. And due to football, both men's and women's teams will play in Memorial Gym, meaning basketball has officially said goodbye to Cowan Spectrum because we're in ICCU next year. And as always, all home games for us are streamed on our Pluto channel or Watch Big Sky TV, but really all Big Sky games are on Pluto TV or Watch Big Sky TV. Our channels are now our game day channel is now in the thousands. It's like 1,056 or something like that. It's around there.
60. So it's up. If you just keep going to the 1,000s, you'll eventually get to us.
Yeah, on the app, there's when live events are taking place, there's a button you can click that says live events, and those channels just aren't present when live events aren't going on. But if you look for Idaho's channel on the Pluto stream where it typically is, you're going to feel lonely looking for it because it's not there anymore. It's a few hundred down, but it's still there. And after we've gone through that's the way the season's going to be different. And Marten, you ready to take on to tell everyone how the women are going to do this year?
Sure. It's finally here. Sorry if I'm just excited about it. It's fun to finally have some Idaho sports to finally watch this year after how things ended. Kind of going back to kind of give people a light refresher of how they did last year. They overall went 22-9, finishing second in the conference, 10-2 at home, 10-5 away with I think can't remember. I think they went 2-2 at 5 neutral courts, or I think 500 neutral courts. And then they kind of their big games last season were 0-0 overtime win against Montana State at Montana State, which gave them their only loss in the conference. And then their another one that kind of I think set the tone for kind of described how they were after the Splash Sisters era, which was even after scoring no points in the third quarter against Montana at home, they still were able to beat them 52-51. And then jumping to this season, they were both picked number one in the media and coaches poll. That's a weird one. Both picked number one in the media and coaches poll, and then with Idaho State number two and tied for number one in the coaches poll, but Idaho gets the top spot just because they have 4 over the Idaho State's 2, or do you not know how that stuff? They're tied and that's it.
So the way those are calculated, because Tubbs of the Club has had media votes, is really it's kind of a golf score, meaning the lowest number of points you get per individual is a higher ranking. So like if I vote, and let's say I put Idaho women at number 1, they just got 1 point. And if I put Eastern Washington at number 11 or Weber State at number 11, they just got 11 points. Your slot, whether you're number 1, 2, or 11, is based off your point total. But these votes always let people know how many people voted for a team for first place, because that kind of gives you an idea of how many people, how many media figures, how many coaches truly believe which teams could win it. And it's just interesting to see, like in the media, which has more voters than the coaches poll, of course. Mm-hmm. Idaho had 16 first place votes. The next highest total was 2 out of Idaho State, whereas in the coaches poll, NAU finished 3rd, but they had 3 first place votes. Idaho had 4 first place votes, but the team tied with Idaho State, they had 2. So women's, if you listen to coaches, the top 4 spots in the women's conference is pretty up for grabs.
It always seems to have been kind of go broad for a second. The top 4, top 5, usually like when we're like cut off for the bye, for that first round bye in the tournament it always seems to kind of be that kind of the top. It always seems to kind of be like a battle for that. And then usually the bottom half has always been kind of a drop off after the top 5, 6 seeds. Going back to Idaho stuff, going back to conference stuff, I have Gina Markson and Beyonce B were picked for preseason all conference. Team, they were the only Vandals that got selected, which is kind of surprising, but hey, we'll show them after the season when more awards are given out. It doesn't really matter what the preseason stuff is. That's just more talking stuff for us media folks, I think. They did, however, lose Lizzie Klinker and Isabel Haddon to graduation. They both graduated, and joining the team for them this upcoming season is freshman Sydney Gandy and Paris Ashley, and a JUCO transfer Riley Alexander, and a grad transfer from. It's always good to steal a grad. It's always good to steal a transfer player from. Always good to steal somebody from your rivals. Gabby Harrington is a grad transfer from Montana, but she also went to Bishop Kelly High School down in southern Idaho.
Yeah, Gabby Harrington's kind of the big get for us to me, in that she was a contributor at University of Montana. And, University of Montana, they have a new women's head coach from a certain Petrino family. Congratulations. But, University of Montana historically has been very good in Big Sky Conference. They have not been bad over the last couple of years, but based off what they consider to be their standards, they're not doing quite as well. And an in-transfer conference like Gabby Harrington objectively moving up in terms of competition purposes, going to Idaho is not only a big get for us because we get a Big Sky contributor, someone we've seen do well in the conference, but to me, it's a pretty big signal that Idaho's women's team and Idaho State too will give credit to the people down south.
Bengals.
Yeah, that's the top of the conference.
Yeah, it's. Oh gosh, I'm gonna transfer this. Like, kind of talking about Gabby still. It's kind of, I think, I kind of view her as how. It's kind of hard to compare player to player, but I kind of view her as that same. And like their watching of Montana games, I kind of maybe view her as maybe a Lizzie Clinker replacement, if that kind of makes sense. Kind of that older team player that'll come kind of that transferred in after playing somewhere else to kind of help lead the team, or be that kind of plug and play player that just knows that you'll always get a guaranteed, and you always know what you're going to get from Gabby, from game to game. You're not going to. They're always consistent. They'll always give you that, maybe that 5, 6, 7, 9 points a game, 7 rebounds, something like that. And just have that senior, more elder role in the team. Yeah,
if we are talking, if we talk outside of sports or we talk about pro sports, it's weird to say this about college athletes, but she's a veteran.
She knows her way around the con. She's played in the conference, so she knows what to expect and how each team plays going in and out. Now, moving on to more of another fun topic I love to talk about is I know they're not going to be playing this year, but their 2021 signees they just signed in this most recent signing class about two and a half weeks ago. They signed Skylar B, Beyonce's sister, played guard from Mchugh, Washington. And sorry to any of these incoming freshmen if I mispronounce your names at all. I'm sorry, I'll learn them properly. McKenna Jacqueline from Kelowna, British Columbia. Madison Rubino from Snohomish, Washington. Jordan Allred from Orinda, California. And Ashlyn Wallace from Clarkston, Washington. Those are the 5 they signed, and unless we have someone to surprise transfer out or anything, I don't expect them to sign anybody else this class. But I'm sorry for that. It's another great John Newley class, and just how they just have a lot of plug and play players, and just kind of I don't want to put pressure on one person in particular, but like some of these players, like John Newley has a type of player for certain positions, and you can tell who they got is a John Newley, like a John Newley point guard, for example.
Yeah, but I'm going to shift this back really quick because we are, of course, ecstatic for all new Vandals, particularly in basketball season. We're excited for all of our all the women joining our. I mean, honestly, we're kind of a dynasty at this point. It's a short-term dynasty. Made the NCAA tournament multiple times, multiple conferences. Just kind of the state of women's basketball too in the Big Sky is that the Idaho schools are on top, which was interesting just compared to the men's. But question for you, Marten. We finished second in conference last year. We are picked to win the conference. Do you feel that past is prologue and that we had a good season last year with younger players and fans should expect that to capitalize in the conference championship, something like that?
I think so. I think they've earned I wouldn't say earned is the right word, but I think as Vandal fans, we should come to expect them to be always fighting for that top spot, fighting for the top 2, top 3, even just fighting for that top 4 spot, top 4 block, the buy in the play in the conference tournament stand for the conference tournament. I think that we should always be expecting them to be fighting for for the top spots in the conference year in and year out, even if it's considered a down year.
In regards to that, Marten, you're the women's basketball expert we have on here. Can you walk us through? Let's pretend our listeners have not watched as many women's games as you, either in person or on the fantastic Pluto stream. Who are the big names you think people should be paying attention to?
I think the obvious ones are going to be Gina Markson, because she can do it all. Defense, offense, shooting, and her cousin is another Vandal great too, so runs in the family. I think if we're looking maybe outside of, I'd say those two are kind of like the top, the number 1, 2. I think another one that I'll throw out there is Haley Christopher. She's another player that can do it all, like be on speed and drive in and get those hard to get layups, or can step back and take a 3 if nobody's covering her. She's done that year, and she's done that in the 2 years she's been here so far, and nobody seems to want to cover her when it's behind the 3-point line.
And relating, another question I have for listeners, which is 2 years ago when that was the Splash Sisters era, Michaela Ferenz, Taylor Pierce. Idaho was we played a pretty fast pace. Which isn't to say that we didn't play defense, of course, but that was the trademark. And if you listen to Big Sky Media, the thing that people kind of took joy in was the ultimate green light that Michaela Ferenz, Taylor Pierce had, which meant, a lot of threes, pretty fast pace. Now, we essentially had to rebuild, a quote unquote rebuild, but it was a reload for last season. And we kind of turned what people might have thought of the traditional Idaho women's basketball script on its head, where we actually weren't even in the top half of the league offensively. We were the number 8 scoring team in conference at 65.6 points a game. But what won us a ton of games is we were the best scoring defense in the league, giving up 58.8 points a game. A little bit, the pace isn't exactly the same as it was in the Taylor Pierce, Michaela Ferenz era. But, that's a pretty big shift to go from a team that their calling card was pace and space to a team that the thing we have to rely on the most is our defense, which it worked fine for us last year. Second place in conference, made to the conference finals before something that shall not be named killed the game. But do you expect this year to be similar to last season? Do you expect it to be some sort of hybrid maybe between this season and the year before, where there's a little bit more pace?
I think so. There'll be a little more pace. I think the defense will still be there. They still have the people. I think will be more of the. I think it'll be more hybrid. I think there'll be a hybrid. It'll be more offense. I think the defense will still be there. You still have the key defensive players like Ellison Kirby and Natalie Klinker there to kind of get the go up and get the rebounds or play the defense on the outside. And then I think with the players they brought in, and I think with the players they brought in, kind of lean more towards the offensive side of things. They'll be able to pick it up and fill the spot on offense and bring the offensive back up, so we're not in the bottom half of offense like we were last year.
Yeah, you know what? That sounds about right. And I am excited this year to see more Gina Markson, point guard, averaged just over 13 points a game last season. She's in her 3rd year as a Vandal, and honestly, to me, that's if there's one player that I'm excited about seeing her development, it's Gina Markson, where she went from she played meaningful minutes as a freshman, of course, but that was the Michaela Ferenz, Taylor Pierce year, and last year. Of course, you might call it a more balanced effort, but I feel safe saying, she was the starting point guard, led the team in scoring, led the team in assists. The keys to the car were kind of hers. So, you sound like you buy Idaho as winning the conference, or if we don't win the conference, top 3 finish.
Yeah, I'd say top 3 confident. I'd say that. Yeah.
Okay. And before we transition over to men's, I have Do you see any sort of schedule highlights you think listeners should be aware of?
I think the big one is Battle of the Palouse for the women's finally potentially happening unless things change. I think that has been a game I have been wanting for a very, very long time. It's one that, Terry, if you're listening, please make it a doubleheader like the men's, like the Eastern Washington games are. I would really love that. I think it would be a fun thing to have, I think. Especially being a lot more fans. Maybe have that for the double, maybe have that for the opener next year. And also playing Texas too is another kind of big, kind of cool. Play another Power 5 or top team in the nation.
Yeah, so our women open up just like our men. Women open up this Thursday, December 3rd, against Sacramento State, but they're opening up in Moscow. That game tips off 6 p.m. The Saturday, the encore of Idaho, Sacramento State, and Moscow takes place at noon Saturday. But then in between that first slate of games, those first two games, we have 3 non-conference games that Marten just alluded to 2 of them. We're at University of Texas on December 9th. That's a Wednesday. We are at Washington State for the Battle of the Palouse, December 13th. That's a Sunday. Final non-conference game versus Seattle U, meaning in Moscow, on December 21st. Then back to NA. Then we have NAU at Flagstaff for the women. So before we transition over, Marten, any last things, any cornerstool takes that you think will be able to launch us into our men's preview?
I say expect great things for this year, though. I think this year will be a lot. I think expect good things from the women's team this year. They have a lot of key contributors returning this year, and I think we all like the preseason polls project. They project us to be number 1. I think we're going to be up there again.
You heard it from the man himself, guys. And so we're going to shift over to men's in a second. But before that, we have maybe my favorite ad read we're ever going to do. If you follow us on Twitter, you know that Tubs the Club just published its 100th episode last Sunday. And I can tell you guys, I was not one of the founding members of the Tubs the Club podcast. Mr. Heemstra, the tromboner, was, to my knowledge. But it wasn't that long ago that I was sending Tubs the Club very long emails as a Twitter messages as a fan listener, because I felt like I finally had someone taking Idaho footballs as seriously as I do. And what I want to do is take a moment to thank all of our listeners, whether you're a current or former Vandal, whether you're an honorary Vandal, like a certain Gary Hill, who, an honorary Vandal where you didn't graduate from the University of Idaho, but you rep our Vandals as much as anyone else, or even the few Eastern Washington or Montana trolls who hate listen to us. We appreciate every single one of you. We value every download and every single donation we see from listeners signing up for a monthly contribution on our Patreon, and those who've made one-time donations through our PayPal. No Tubs the Club contributor has taken any sort of paycheck from those donations. Every single penny goes to keeping the lights on and the show running. So if you like what we're doing, consider signing up for a monthly donation at patreon.com/Tubs the Club, or make a one-time gift at paypal.me/Tubs the Club. Again, every listener, thank you. Every donation, thank you again. So with that, men's basketball, Marten. And it is just a different world when we talk about men's basketball.
It's night and day. I know if I'm just looking at the polls, it kind of seems like if you just turned them upside down, they almost kind of look inverse of each other. They just, oh boy.
Yeah, so spoiler alert, men were unanimous. Men were picked last in both the media and coaches poll. And I'm not going to beat the past to death, but I do think it's worth acknowledging where we're at right now. as far as the men's season, the men's outlook. This is year 2 under Zach Kloss. This is his first, what some people might call full, quote unquote, full season, as in he had a full recruitment, full summer,
full recruitment for his own guys, not just
exactly. So, yeah,
Verlin-ish guys.
Exactly, a full spring, summer recruitment time. No, let's say, quote unquote, last minute additions that really we needed just to have enough guys. But last year did happen. We finished over 8-24 overall, 4-16 in the Big Sky, which is tied for last with Idaho State. Minor asterisk, 2 of those wins came against sub D1 teams. So against D1 opponents, we were 6-24 last year. And we also had 2 exhibition losses to Central Washington and Lewis and Clark State College. That season, that came right after a 2018-19 season where we went 3-26 versus D1 teams with another exhibition loss to LCSC and just a regular loss to Northwest Nazarene. So that's a 2-year run. And I know it's not one coach, but just so everyone knows where we're starting, that's a 2-year run of 9-50 versus Division I teams, aka fewer wins than Montana's football team won in their last season. And last year, our men's season wasn't cut short by coronavirus. We lost in the first round of the Big Sky Conference tournament to Southern Utah. And a couple stats just to give context where we're at. We had the worst scoring margin in the Big Sky at we were outscored by 10 points a game. We were the number 10 scoring offense at 63.6 points a game. The number 9 scoring defense, it's where we gave up 73.6 points a game. We were last place in turnover margin, where we had a negative 3.95 turnover margin, which means we on average turned the ball over about 4 more times than we had assists. And maybe the clearest number to let you know how the last 2 seasons went is our home attendance average was down to just over 1,000 last season, which is to say you could have socially distanced last season when you didn't need to. But what we care about, of course, is this year. But it is important to understand the quote unquote rebuild we're looking at is as profound as in the Leonard Perry era. So that's the task ahead of Zach Kloss. So shifting back to those polls real quick, Eastern Washington was picked first place by both the coaches and the media. University of Montana was picked second by coaches and media. The rest is a little bit scattershot, whereas like the coaches polls had Weber State at number 3, but the media had Weber State at number 5. We're not going to go through the rest. You can look those up. The big deal for you guys, Eastern Montana, both number 1 and 2. Idaho State and Idaho, both 10 and 11. So shockingly, or not so shockingly, Idaho had no players selected to the preseason All Big Sky team. Jacob Davison from Eastern Washington was picked as a preseason MVP. And we have not, just like the women, we have not yet seen this men's team play because our first games were canceled due to coronavirus concerns. But we open up this Thursday, December 3rd at 5 at Sacramento State. Then we play Saturday, December 5th at 10:35 in the morning at Sacramento State, followed by a short non-conference slate. And I'm only bringing this up, and Martin, I'm going to ask you about a key game in a second and then talk about the season. Non-conference, we have at Washington State, December 9th at 6, at Cal Bakersfield, Saturday, December 12th, time to be announced. At number 1, Gonzaga, Monday, December 14th at 6. Final non-conference game is at Utah, University of Utah, the Pac-12 team, on Friday, December 18th, time to be announced. And then just like our women, we have our second slate of Big Sky games against NAU, except we host. First one's December 31st. So first question for you, Martin, before I jump into what we should look for in this team. Thoughts on finally having Gonzaga back on the schedule?
I'm excited. I hope it's like, although maybe travel concerns, travel restrictions might have played a role in it, it's kind of fun to be playing Gonzaga again. I know women played them 2 years ago in 2018-2019 season, and it was, I'm just excited to play another local team we haven't not played in a while.
You are much more optimistic than me. It might be good for us that we'll be.
I think it's the one to kind of cook out about the Gonzaga thing. It'll be like if you were to, I don't know like the exact. I know we're not probably like rankings wise, we're probably not the last in rankings, but we're essentially, I'd say, polar opposites. It'd probably be a kind of a good thing to say. Like they're the top and we're like the bottom of everything. It'll be kind of fun it'll be interesting to see how much we get beat by.
Okay, so at least we're on the same page there. I think it is probably long-term great for if we can get competitive because that's actually a televised game, and it's just more fun to me when we have some local teams. But am I excited that when our first matchup against Gonzaga is when they're number one and us Idaho in Ken Palm rankings we're in the 330s? That could have come at a better year, but we're going to transition from that. And the reason I gave you guys all that context is because I think it is important before we preview the men's season to decide what should we even look for. Because we just went 9-50 in 2 years against D1 teams. That there's reason that our attendance is down. There's reason that some people might be ready to not even really pay much attention to the men's basketball team, but I think you should. And really, the thing that I think is important to remember about basketball compared to, let's say, football is you don't need a class of 15 players in basketball to turn a team around. We lost about 6 guys from last year's team, a couple to graduation. Trayvon Allen, all-conference player, 21.6 points per game. We're going to miss him, but even with that all-conference, we finished last. Even with an all-conference player like Trayvon, we finished last in the conference. So we lost him graduation. Markel Frazier grad transferred to Detroit Mercy. Quentin Forrest graduated, and then we had guys who other people who just transferred or left the program. Jackson Woodward, who is just no longer on the basketball team. He didn't really play much last year. He was a cool story to be on the football and basketball team, but he's no longer with us on the team, that is. Not metaphorically speaking, of course. Keyshawn Dixon transferred out. BJ Simmons, who some people might have been excited about if you saw like our first 4 games last year. He looked like he could have been a good contributor, but then he was injured. Then he was gone. He transferred out. That's a total of about 6 roster spots, which means, the bad news, we had a rough season last year, but the good news, we have 50% of our team is new. And if we're going to be a good team, it's going to be because of some of those new players some of those, 6 or so new roster spots that we have. So I'm about to go over some of the new faces on the team, but so you guys are aware, in my mind, our key returners are our leading returning scorer, Scott Blakeney, at 8 points per game. That's the depth of what we have to replace scoring wise. Cause even if we only score 65-ish points a game again, we only have our leading scorer has 8 points per game coming back. Points are going to come somewhere. We also have Jack Wilson, former 4-star transfer from Oregon State. You know what, Marten? I'm going to ask you about Jack Wilson in a second after I get to these next 2 guys. Then Javeri Christmas and Damon Thacker. Now, all 4 of those guys, by the way, Christmas and Thacker, both guards, those are all those guys are fine complementary pieces where, if let's say it wouldn't be shocking to find out there's a world where Scott Blakeney had made the Eastern Washington roster and was playing a little bit for the Eastern Eagles. Or it wouldn't be shocking to find out that University of Montana said, yeah, we'll take a flyer on Jack Wilson. And he made their roster and came off the bench, or maybe he's healthy and he's starting. But none of those guys are all Big Sky candidates in my mind. They're all complementary pieces who need some of those bigger names, let's say, bigger talents to work with. Because if Scott Blakeney is your number 4 scorer, that's a great team. If Scott Blakeney is your number 1 is going to be your number 1 option, that's a long season. But before we shift to new faces, Marten, out of Scott Blakeney, Jack Wilson, Javeri Christmas, and Damon Thacker, which of those guys are you kind of interested to see if they make some sort of developmental jump?
I'm interested to see if Javari kind of see if he can maybe take a jump up and maybe become more of a scoring. I won't say scoring threats there. We're just more productive. I'm interested to see Javari, kind of see him kind of take a step up this year. I know he's kind of like, I follow him on Twitter a lot and he talks a lot, and I think he's excited to get back out there, and I hope he can be the one to maybe take over the number one spot to maybe jump over Scott Blakeney and get the number one scoring spot. Hopefully, have some more key contributors to the team.
He's a little bit more of an energy kind of guy, where he's a real strong athlete, no question. And he had a couple games where he scored all right. He can hit threes okay. He's not an explosive 3-point shooter by any means, but he's a solid player. That's part of why I call, in my mind, him. He's another version of a complementary piece that we just need the pieces that those complementary pieces complement. Now, the guy I'm curious about is a lot of people are pretty excited for Jack Wilson last year, 7-foot center, pretty good athlete. He transferred here after, his senior year of high school. He sat out the entire year because of a back injury. Then he's at Oregon State, and for one reason or another, it didn't appear to work out. And I know when we saw him play, I thought it still looked like he was working himself into shape. Not to say which isn't a comment on him taking care of himself or anything. It's that if you had a serious enough back issue to miss a year and part of the following season, it's just going to take time to get back to the type of athleticism, the type of shape that being a D1 athlete requires. And that isn't simply cardiorespiratory. That's if you had a back injury, you have to, anyone who's an older Vandal knows, you got a back injury, you got to rebuild your back. And that doesn't happen overnight. But Javary Christmas, Jack Wilson are both, they're both two guys who I think could take developmental leaps. Now, out of those two, I'd say Jack Wilson's the most likely to be all conference, but I don't know I wouldn't predict Jack Wilson all conference right now. Really, we make a turnaround. I think it's going to be because of a few of the new faces that are on this team. And we're about to go over a few of those faces. Now, spoiler alert, because our first games were canceled due to COVID, what we've been able to do is research stats, research a little bit of clips. Marten, were you able? Did you have any guys who you saw huddle tapes or something like that from?
Not any of the more recent players. I know people were. The one person I kind of saw a little bit on was AJ Youngman when he committed last year, but I think he had to sit out because of injuries or something. I can't remember exactly what his situation was, but I remember people were kind of high on him last year.
Yeah, we can start there. And the best way we can preview this, guys, is we can talk about the type of player these guys appear to be. Now, is there a chance that our assessments turn out to be slightly different once these guys are seeing Division I reps? Yeah, of course. But we're working with what we got. And because we have 6 new faces, I think it's important for listeners to be acquainted with a few of them. And the first one we can start with is we have AJ Youngman, transfer guard from Otero College. And the big thing from him, he's a shooter. And that was something we lacked on our team. To me, we lacked that last year. We shot this might surprise people, and sometimes it surprises me, but sometimes not. Idaho shot a pretty high 3-point percentage relative to the league last year, but we don't shoot very many threes. And now I'm not going to get into a shooting threes versus not shooting threes discussion, but it is safe to say 3-point shooting did not win a ton of games for Idaho last year. And, we get a guy, we shot 35.9% from the field on threes last year. That was third best in league, but we made the fewest threes in the league. We made 92 threes on the season. Trayvon made a ton of those, and he's gone. And a guy, again, we lacked. Trayvon was an explosive scorer. I wouldn't call him an explosive shooter. AJ Youngman, 45% from three at junior college. That's a guy who's a candidate to be an explosive shooter, which means a guy who can hit, 4 or 5 threes can get hot and hit 4 or 5 threes in a game. Cam Tyson, for listeners, was one of the most explosive shooters we've ever seen. Another guy who we're excited for because of his father's presence on all Vandals and also a couple hashtag AskTATCs we're going to get to is center Tanner Christensen, 6'10", from Spokane Valley, graduated from University High School, just spent 2 years on a mission. So good news for him. He didn't have a season cut short, and it may take time again. And I think this is a thing that happens with things like BYU football, SUU football, is the guys go on the mission, and look, the point of your mission isn't training for football, training for basketball. But a benefit is you're a 20-year-old freshman. You're a little bit more of a developed man by the time you're starting, which Tanner's going to be a candidate to see minutes at center and at power forward. We're going to see obviously how he looks, but we have two forward centers in Jack Wilson, Scott Blakeney. Babacar Thiambain off the bench plays some of the forward, but I'd in no way be shocked if we see some good minutes out of Tanner Christensen this year at a post position. Another guy that you may have heard of, Marten, Ethan Kilgore, freshman from Gower, Missouri. He has been a guy a lot of people are talking about as maybe he might be someone who sees some meaningful minutes, averaged 25.6 points a game as a senior in high school. My understanding is he's the type of guard who can do a little bit of it all. Can put the ball on the floor. Is also a pretty good shooter. Isn't the fastest guy on the floor, but is certainly not slow. You've heard good things in regards to Ethan, of course, as well.
Oh yeah, I think he's been the only one that I've actually watched tape of him. Or when he first committed, I was like, oh, I should probably watch a little of him. And I liked what he saw. I think I'll be intrigued to see how he plays, how much he plays as a freshman, how much he picks up the D1 game and Big Sky basketball in general.
Yeah, and we've seen impact freshmen. And also we've seen guys who can stay 4 years in the program and develop. Steven Madison is always the go-to example of that, but Victor Sanders, not a bad one either. And last couple of guys we'll run through quickly. We have Kendall Mchugh, point guard, transfer from College of Southern Idaho. He's a sophomore, averaged 10.6 points a game there at College of Southern Idaho and shot 38% from three. We have Deandre Robinson, guard, transfer from Tallahassee Community College, where he's a junior. He averaged 14.1 points per game and shot 48% from three as a freshman at Division II Wheeling, then transferred to Tallahassee, had injury issues, didn't play a ton. And then we have Hunter Jack Madden, guard from Sydney, Australia, and he was a developmental player for the Sydney Kings. It's part of the NBL, National Basketball League. It's the professional league in Sydney, Australia. So of those guys, Marten, do you have a specific player you're most excited to see or you're most curious about?
I'm interested to see like another one is, I think, Deandre. I think he could be like kind of like AJ, like even though it was D2, like having another guy that can shoot the three, I think will be instrumental if for Idaho to not be a basement dweller in the Big Sky Conference again this year. If he can come in and shoot that or shoot in that general range, I think will be a huge boost to the Idaho offense this year.
Yeah, there is no question. What we're looking for right now is guard play. A conference like the Big Sky Conference, just because of its size, we're not going to get a ton of 7-foot centers who can also shoot threes and who have 40-inch verticals. Those guys are going to Power 5 conferences. They're there for a year and they leave. Because of that composition, the Big Sky just tends to be a guard-driven league. Now, it doesn't mean having great posts can't get you wins, because obviously it can't. We at Idaho remember having BJ Blake, first team All-League power forward for us. That was a huge boon, and part of why that team, which that was Vic Sanders as a senior, that team disappointed in losing in their first conference tournament game, but part of why they're as good as they were is because we had a post presence. And Zach Kloss, I'm going to jump into our hashtag AskTATC, or what we call now hashtag AskTubs. Kurt Christensen asked, can you compare and contrast offensive, defensive philosophies between Coach Kloss and Coach Verlin? I mean, they're really similar. And from what we saw, it was pretty close to carbon copy of a lot of the offensive sets are pretty similar. It's a motion offense, kind of famous in coaching circles as coming from Stu Morrill, and Don Verlin was definitely he came from the Stu Morrill system, and Zach Kloss then came from Verlin. So it's there to me from those two seasons. There wasn't a ton of difference in my mind in play style. Which means, Idaho is similar to Montana, where we do like to try to establish the post a little bit more than other teams. And part of what we can see reflects that is we're shooting way less threes than other teams. But Everyone who watches basketball, Marten, I mean, you know this from watching women, you know this from watching the men. Whether you want to be, if you want to be a wing team, it's helpful to have a post like Eastern Washington has Tanner Groves. They spread the floor, and then Tanner Groves gets one-on-one matchups in the post. He gets easier buckets. That's great for them. If you're a team like Idaho, where you try to go in the post first, having 3-point shooters is important because, one, if our post is doing well, then you're going to collapse the defense. You're going to kick out to get open shots. And that's a little bit more the model that Zach Kloss teams go for, meaning like the type of threes they get are more likely to be off set plays, or they're more likely to be off at kickouts. Whereas a team like Eastern Washington, they are fine shooting a 3 5 seconds into the shot clock, if they're in transition or something like that. But not a huge amount of difference between Verlin and Kloss in my mind at this point, but we're going to see because this is Kloss's first year where it's essentially all his guys. Mm-hmm. And does that mean his offense is going to look that different? Maybe not that different, but maybe when he's able to recruit his own guys, he's able to fill holes in a way, just approach filling holes, let's say, in a way that was different than Don Verlin. But similar to Don Verlin, really, if we have a big turnaround year, when Verlin took over for Pfeiffer, what happened is he hit a home run on some transfers and freshmen, mostly transfers, but he really hit a home run with guys like Mac Hobson. Marvin Jefferson too was another at the post, another home run we hit. If Idaho's gonna be solid, Kurt, and if our play style is even going to matter, which I think it will, we're going to have to hit a couple home runs on the new guys. We're going to have to see developmental strides from someone like Jack Wilson, someone like Scott Blakeney. Scott Blakeney is a much better shooter now than he was as a freshman. Maybe that can push him into 11 or 12 point a game score. I don't know. I don't think it's safe for any Vandals to think we're going to have a first team all league player candidate like Trayvon Allen this year. But if we can have a few guys who can score double figures, we might be able to start contending for middle of the conference. Is that similar to how to your take, Marten?
Yeah, it is. I mean, I'm not gonna lie. Like, I don't expect a whole lot this year. I shouldn't say I don't expect anything from them this year, but I'm kind of taking this year as like, this is like kind of Coach Kloss's first kind of blank slate, and he gets to do what he wants, and not just he's kind of just an interim guy, can't really do a whole lot. Then he needs to steady the ship and get things on the right track. I think it's if they have players that kind of pop off and get those 10 point, get everything going. I think you're right to kind of expect the middle of the pack, maybe fighting for a final bye in the conference tournament.
And that's a great transition to a hashtag Ask Tubbs. Almost said the wrong way. Hashtag Ask Tubbs from a guy listeners might be familiar with. It's some guy at Chris_P_Hammond. He asks kind of two questions, which is the men's team really the worst of Big Sky? Seems wrong to me. And why is it we are so content being a bottom tier men's team after a decade or so being a better to upper echelon conference team? I'm going to answer those both, which is, I'm going to say talent-wise, I feel safe saying I don't think Idaho is last talent-wise. I think teams that we can definitely, if we hit it, we need to hit a couple home runs on these younger guys. But Northern Arizona, Idaho State, and Sacramento State are all teams we should presume. If we hit a couple home runs, we should leapfrog those three immediately. Idaho State's played a few games this year that have not been canceled due to COVID. They look absolutely terrible. They're scoring the ball significantly worse than we were last year. They're turning the ball over significantly more than we were last year. So if we can just be steady with last year, that's a team we might leapfrog anyway. But I don't, Chris, this is really a thing that's interesting to me about Vandal Sports, which is the basketball team was pretty solid under Verlin. I honestly think it's kind of a defense mechanism to let's say be content where both of us are talking about this is a rebuilding year, because it is, and that fans should temper their expectations because they should. I won't say that I think a lot of people, for example, like Kurt Christensen, he is not hoping his son's team is bottom of the conference. But I am pretty sure it's tempering expectations because like this team, the Big Sky has some very good teams in the conference. University of Montana gets G5 level recruits. Heck, they have one of their transfers, Stedman from San Jose State, averaged 13 points a game at a G5 school. This is who we're competing with. We have to do well to win this conference. We have to do well to compete with the tops of the conference. Eastern Washington, they almost beat WSU. They should have beat WSU. And Eastern only played 6 guys, like a men's league team, because they had so many people out for coronavirus. The top of our conference here is pretty good. There is some stability in the coaching between guys like Travis DeCure at Montana, Randy Ray at Weber State, and Shantae Leggins in Eastern Washington. So to me, I mean, I don't think a lot of Vandal fans are saying, hey, it's fine that we're not very good. I think we're mostly accepting that the entire athletic department's been in a transition, and we need to see results from the men's team, but we have to acknowledge the depths of where we're coming from, and like a top 3 finish is unreasonable in my mind. How do you feel about that idea of, is this team the worst versus, are we setting the wrong expectations?
I don't think they are the worst, though I will say after the last 2 years, watching them play the last 2 years, I think they have definitely earned the preseason spot of being picked worst in conference, because they haven't shown anything. I mean, they've lost games to non D1 comp teams. It's like they've earned the bottom spot in the conference.
Yeah, and we talked about this off camera, and we got to close this up pretty quick. So I'm gonna go after answering here. We're gonna do our final hashtag Ask Tubbs. But I did a quick research project going over last 2 rosters heading into this season, and the good news about this season is it's really close to a new roster. So any frustrations we had from last season, and we obviously appreciate every Vandal who's played for us, but part of the issue last year was lack of talent, and half of our roster is different. So we have essentially 6 shots if we can hit a couple home runs, that's a huge difference. But I looked at the roster from 2 years ago. That was Verlin's last season. It's and Chris just sent us a message, so apparently I misinterpreted that. We'll go back to it. But the roster from Verlin's last season, they're all essentially gone, and a couple stayed in Moscow. Trayvon stayed. Scott Blakeney stayed. But of all the transfers, we had around 8 guys transfer from that roster. Only 3 even made a D1 team afterward. 5 or 6 we're not D1 players. Last season, we lost Trayvon to graduation. We lost Quentin to graduation. Quentin was a fine player, but he was another complimentary piece. Markel had injury issues. He transferred over D1, but he was another complimentary piece. And a lot of the other guys that we lost, they're not on D1 rosters. So the issue is a lot of our young guys, we just weren't hitting home runs or even doubles, let's say, with some of our new guys. But again, we have half a new roster. So that's what we need to look at is, of the new roster, who can be the pieces that our Scott Blakeneys and our Jack Wilsons and our Javari Christmases are complementary pieces to. But Chris, in case I answered this wrong, I don't believe I wasn't trying to say that it's good to have low expectations. I was just trying to explain why would people have low expectations? What's a reasonable explanation for why that seems to shake out? Because I mean, obviously we want our Vandals to be top of the league, just like we've talked about in football. It looks like a turnaround season, but a high note to come close to ending the show on. Another hashtag Ask Tubbs with Kurt Christensen. He asked, how will the ICCU arena stack up against other Big Sky venues? And Marten, I want to hear your take on this first before I give mine.
I haven't been to that many other Big Sky venues. I've seen what Eastern has through Big Sky. The only one I've been to was is it Dahlberg Arena for Montana?
Correct. That's correct.
I went to Dahlberg for one game when the band traveled to Missoula for the tournament in 2013, I think it was 2014, and it'll stack up to Dahlberg. I think it compares very nicely to what Montana has. I think it'll be smaller. I can't remember exactly what Dahlberg has, but it'll be I think it'll be up there with some of with the top teams in the conference.
So what I'm going to say. Oh, and Chris is jumping on. Chris is here to correct the record. Chris is here to correct the record. Okay, Marten, do you know how to?
So
okay, I gotta let Chris in before I give my answer. Apparently, see, this is the problem. Chris,
oh boy,
Brian Marceau, substitute teacher, doesn't know what the hell he's doing. Driving us off.
Hey, he got me in real quick. So one, wow, my hat is all crooked for people watching. But one, Sounders win. Heck yeah. Two, so I followed bit. So you might have answered. I got bits and pieces of your answers there while I was running up the stairs celebrating the win. My complaint, and so sorry if you already answered it. So I'm going, what was it? Just 2 years ago, we were the number 2 preseason, or number 1 preseason, correct? In men's? I'm talking men's hoop.
Yeah.
So we went from preseason number 1, and then you go back to the not early Verlin years, but, the 2010, 11, 12, 13, constantly a 3 seed, a 4 seed, a 2 seed, losing in the rounds. The thing that bothers me the most is we look at where we're at now, and we seem very complacent with being like when I saw the preseason rankings, and I was like, I get it. Last year sucked, but I expected maybe we get 9th, 8th, 10th, even maybe in the preseason polls. The fact that we finished last bothers me. And I guess I'm asking Brian, as somebody who definitely follows the team closer to me or closer than I do, why is it that we are and I'm not saying us, right? Because we covered the team, but as a whole, I feel like the Vandal Nation isn't expecting more out of this team. And I get Zach Clausen in his first year, but I mean, for all intents and purposes, is the second year. Yes, first year, totally in control. But my biggest complaint with going into this year is we're being viewed as not a basketball power. When we entered the Big Sky, we were 2 or 3 seed in the WAC for a couple of years going in. We were preseason number 1, just stone's throw years ago. Now we're last place. To me, as the casual Vandal basketball fan, bothers me. I don't find it acceptable, but I don't see enough people complaining about it either. So maybe I'm one too many Montucky cold snacks deep, but that bothers me. And I was just getting the professional opinion. The women's team's rolling. The women's team, if it's not broke, don't fix it. So there's nothing to complain about there. But I'm going, that's another thing we should just plug is that the women's team is doing so well. Shouldn't we hold the men's team to the same standard?
Yeah, so the answer that I have to that, and I guess let me say it a different way. I was trying to not filibuster for an entire show.
Well, I was trying to log in.
So phase 1 is, I think 2 years ago when that was the Cam Tyson, Jared Rodriguez team, Verlin's last year. I think people were willing to cut slack to that team in a way that maybe we wish they did not, because we lost, I think it was like 8 players to graduation. And typically a team's not going to lose 2/3 of your roster as graduating seniors. So we had no choice but to either have a ton of JUCO or a ton of freshmen. Verlin went the freshman route, and people were willing to write off as like, hey, these are underclassmen. But what it turned out is not only were they underclassmen, the D1 players we had left. And then the other freshmen from that roster, like the jury's in. They weren't D1 players. And when I say that, I mean 2 years out, they're almost none of them other than Jared Rodriguez, Raekwon Mitchell, and Cam Tyson. None of those other guys are on D1 rosters. So then the next season, after being as bad as we were, I think a ton of people saw, hey, we don't have a ton coming back. And it was like, okay, well, hey, it's a weird first year for a head coach. Maybe we'll, temper expectations. They're trying harder or something like that. I know I wish people didn't have exactly that view, but that's just kind of what happened. We had an awful season with really a lot of swings and misses on recruits. Then we had a weird season for Klaus's first year, and we had the financial difficulties, all that kind of stuff. And I think that is your explanation for why isn't there more outrage about this is our third year now, where, again, like you were correct, in the Vic Sanders, BJ Blake year, we were preseason number 1, and now we're consecutive years preseason, number 11.
So as the basketball guy, do you find the apathy towards this? I mean, is that what it is? Are we just? I don't know. I don't know where I'm going with it. I just feel like I mean,
I know what you're doing.
we just went from being a consistent top 4 team to now just being like nobody's even like yelling at the hills that we got voted for 2 years in a row now, last place. Or we not picked last place last year, but I guess to uplift, and you might have covered, like I said, I didn't catch the whole preview. I was watching a playoff game, but do we have a Vic Sanders? Do we have a Kyle Barone? Do we have one of those 4-year guys on this team that you can see within the next year or two elevates us to? And I know you guys were about to get in the hashtag Tubs, so I don't know if mine I asked on here are the only ones, or if you have some on Twitter. But
yeah,
then I'll leave it there.
We were trying to respect the hour mark, which we just
I saw that. We just crossed.
Yeah, so in short, we did talk about
I had 20 minutes. I'm just kidding.
We did talk about the new recruits. We have a mix. We have a nice mix of JUCO, some freshmen who are our candidates. And like essentially your point is correct. We have a few guys returning that are complementary pieces, but those guys need to complement something. And if we're going to be a good team, it's because we are going to have to, if we're going to be an okay team even, because the Big Sky, we have some institutions getting pretty strong. Like we talked about Montana and Eastern Washington, but Montana State looks like they hit a home run with their new head coach. Southern Utah, they're not going to win the conference, but they're getting a little bit better each year. And Weber State, we can expect that after a down year where they retooled, that they're going to get a little bit better. Sorry, not a little bit better. We should reasonably expect Weber's going to go back to at least top third of the conference. For us to be solid, we're going to have to hit a home run with a couple guys this year. We're going to have to get a couple. We're going to have to see those, whether it's a junior college, one of the junior college guys like AJ Youngman or Deandre Robinson or Kendall Mchugh, who are just impact players right off the bat, or whether we see guys like Hunter Jack Madden or Ethan Kilgore, who they're solid right off the bat. We know we've got him for 4 years.
Or don't forget Gabe Quinnett. Maybe he takes maybe he has a huge sophomore jump and just decides to kind of jump up and make another play.
I think he's a complimentary player. He's a complimentary player. He's a good shooter. He's not going to be an all league. He's not an all league type talent. Like I love that he's on the team, and he absolutely adds value, but he's not an all league talent. Is
Chance another one of those guys that's going to be another complimentary player?
Chance he's a great story, but we've seen him for multiple years. If he was going to be a 12-point a game scorer, we would have seen it by now. He's just not. He's another great story. Really happy that he's on the team. And not every player on every team can be, scoring 20 points a game.
Oh yeah.
So again, it's great to have Chance on the team. He's not an all Big Sky talent. He's not going to make an all Big Sky team. He's not going to be the thing that makes us, finish top half of the conference.
No. Anyways, I want to hijack this episode. Can't wait to listen back and hear about how there ain't nothing like cracking a Montucky cold snack.
Well, you're here for the last question, and then we're done.
Oh. Well, I have nothing to add. I was going to shout out Carly Wilson and then just bounce. But sure, let's answer the question.
Well, what we were answering was Kurt Christensen, Ask Tubbs. How will the ICCU arena stack up against other Big Sky venues? And the answer is, I'm not being a homer. I have paid attention to Big Sky arenas. I've been in a few of them too.
There's only one to compete with. I mean, it's Portland State, and we're newer and bigger and more expensive. It's us.
So the cool thing that both Idaho, and jury's in, Portland State and Idaho will be the top two venues in the conference. Both Portland State and Idaho did the right thing. Attendance is down nationwide, and we built reasonably sized facilities. Portland State's 3,000 for them. We're 4,200 max capacity. That's the right call for us. If at 4,200, we would have sold that out on the WSU game a couple years ago, but we wouldn't be averaging a sellout. So to me, that's the right call. Facility wise, Portland State, they built their arena to look it's supposed to look like a ship on the inside. Have that kind of steep rising on both sides. That's purposeful because they're the Vikings. We have, the nod to Idaho's timber industry, through the exposed timber. It also has,
Idaho.
It has kind of on the outside, outside looking in, of course, it's got its architecture is a little bit more modern. If you're into that, that's fantastic. I don't think it looks ugly by any means. I care about what's inside. And we finally have men's basketball facilities. Men's and women's for practice. Cause right now, I don't know if you saw on their Twitter, the men's team, they're practicing at the SRC. And the women have, I don't know where the women are practicing, but in a typical season, sometimes they have to practice at the PEB. and that's just not a fantastic option. We're not gonna have practice space where we're trying to share with volleyball, men's basketball, and women's basketball when the season starts. It's just basketball, and that's a huge step up for us. But again, quality too. We're gonna have the nicest looking place to me, no question. Montana, Dahlberg's a nice place. It probably needs a little bit of renovation. Weber State's a nice place. Neither of those particularly new, but of the older, bigger ones, I'd say those are
the more hollowed grounds, as it were. I mean, if you're going to win the Big Sky, those are traditionally places you have to go in and win, and they have that going for them. Yeah. I mean, not the prettiest sight, but the fact is, there's winning in that building, and you got to overcome that. But I agree with you. We have the nicest.
And the last comparison too is obviously we don't even need to talk about Sacramento State. It's smaller than a lot of high school gymnasiums. So Sacramento State, the jury's in. That's the worst place as far as facilities.
So much money to waste.
Yeah, Idaho State just made the right call last season where they moved out of Holt Arena and into Reed Court, which is kind of like their version of Mem Gym, except it's much better for seating. Yeah, it seats over 1,000. It seats I think a couple thousand. But it's an older facility, so if you like kind of the retro look, I actually really do like Reed Gym. And Mem Gym, if it seated more, would be a nice option B, but it doesn't, and it's certainly not set up to add seating, so that's how it is. NAU has a similar setup now where they're not always playing at the Walk-Up Sky Dome, which they shouldn't anyway. They have facilities similar to Idaho State's, but it doesn't look as nice in terms of like being retro. Montana State plays at the Brick, which is a rodeo facility, which happens to have a basketball court in there too. So I wouldn't write home about Montana State. Eastern Washington's pretty nice. I'd put them similar class of like Dahlberg and Weber State. But again, jury's fact check 3,000, not 2,000 at Reed Gym. But again, jury's in. We will have the best facilities in the conference, and I don't think it's going to be that close.
And my take on it real quick before we get to Marten, I think, and you kind of hit on it there, just be proud. I mean, we raised, what was this thing, 14 million? No, it's more than that, 44, right? Like a handful more. Multiple million. And then you look at what you had to, 44, Eastern Washington's struggling to fundraise 14 million for their new stadium renovation. And then you touched on Northern Colorado. Northern Colorado already has like $4.3 million raised for a new strength and conditioning center. So you look at Idaho and you go, look, as far as the Big Sky goes, this is the most financial, like one of the larger undertakings the conference has taken in a while, probably since Montana's Champion Center or maybe Montana State's closing of the bowl. So you just got to be proud as an alumni that as far as the Big Sky goes, we're one of the ones really pushing the envelope as far as facilities. So when it comes to basketball, Portland State, we just talked about them, their gym. But this gym is going to be a huge difference maker for all sports, not just basketball. The fact that we got it done, and it's going to be one of the nicest facilities, helps out every sport. It helps the conference as a whole. And so as an alumni, I'm proud that we were able to do something that a lot of Big Sky schools, unfortunately, aren't able to fund that type of money. And though a lot of it was through a sponsorship through ICCU, I mean, we're in a really good spot with it, and I think we should be incredibly proud. And I hope even someone like myself, who's not the biggest basketball guy, I will be at that opening game, and I will probably buy tickets for that opening season. And I hope that's what it gets across to a lot of people, is to start believing again in Vandal basketball, which is why I'm being so hard on that last place ranking. Is you're a year away from a gym opening. Let's get the excitement going. This is the year to make a push.
Mm-hmm. It is. And you know what, Chris, your timing, you actually jumped in right after Marten had given his take.
Yeah.
So listeners have all three of us, which means we're ready to close the bar.
What's on my podcast? That's on you guys. Adios.
All right.
Peace.
So we are closing. Chris, great to have you. That was a quick exit too. So close the bar. Quick reminder, guys, men's and women's team tip off this Thursday against Sacramento State and then Saturday against Sacramento State. Marten, before we call it a day, anything you want to make sure all of our listeners know about life with a tromboner?
I'd say just keep following me. Maybe follow me on Twitter. Kind of watch. I'll probably be live tweeting my reactions to the games this Thursday and Saturday. I know I'm actually going to watch the games I'm going to be watching the games again. Chris, do you want thumbs up? Do you want to join back in? Okay.
Okay.
Oh, and I think we're just going to be. I think it'll be. I'm just excited to be able to watch again. Follow me on Twitter at Hemi_71 to keep up with all my women's basketball takes and just my fandom with them. And I'll probably be talking about the team again. I'll probably be keep talking about them all again.
So, one, we probably need to have a Big Sky Podcast Network discussion to turn our game direct messages into just tweets. So that we have some people to engage with, because we have some pretty lively in-game threads that we should probably just invite other people to join. But you guys can find me at Brian Marceau. That's Marceau on Twitter. Don't worry about anything else that I have because I never post anything except cat pictures. And the thing I got going is Vandal football starts. Vandal basketball starts. I want to be football, but Vandal basketball starts. And we at least have real games we'll be talking about. We'll record in a couple more weeks to give you guys updates. And now it's time for the best band in all the land to take us out. Sound of Idaho.
Beer song.
Okay, the beer song. Not Sound of Idaho. I'm a filthy liar. The beer song. Go Van.
Yeah. Go Van.